That's my introduction. Now, what I thought we'd do, which we haven't done in the past, is quickly go around the room and give an opportunity for all of you to say quickly who you are and why you're here. So, I'll start off with Gary. Maybe we need to kind of reorient slightly so everybody can hear. Please stand up.
I'm Gary. I'm freelance software developer. Trying to open source projects I work with, release, publish on GitHub or whatever. Involved in many little projects.
I'm Aaron Grocer, work in the Mesh project, mapping Edinburgh's social story, which is rich, and we'll talk about that.
I'm Richard Roger. I'm a professor of economic and social history and write to the Mesh project mapping Edinburgh's social history, about which you'll hear some more shortly.
I'm Jeremy Darrow, work for the Scottish Government, but also do some open data work with a charity called Unity. I'm Rupert Goodwins. I'm a technology journalist and sometimes developer. I've just moved to Scotland, so turn up and see what's going on.
I'm Pippa Gardner, so one of the co-founders of Organize, and we've been about 3 months.
I'm Toby Connor, I'm the CTO of Urban Ties, and I'm really interested to hear more about open data.
Hey, I'm Sally Kerr. I'm the Digital Edition Manager at Edinburgh Council, and I'm here because you didn't make me come. Yeah, no, because I'm the open data lead.
I'm Gordon McDonald. I work at Geosciences at the University of Edinburgh, Road. I'm a GIS support officer. I run this MSc course there and other tuition using GIS.
Hello, I'm Kate Byrne. I feel fairly recently worked at the University of Edinburgh and startup Edinburgh doing cyber stuff.
I'm Rob Page, University of Glasgow. I'm interested in open data and context for libraries.
Hi, I'm Alex Ward. I work with a company called Compass, recently set up in Glasgow, Australia originally. We use data from Companies House and Land Registry, as well as some other sources to visualise relationships between people and companies and companies. Interested in learning about this group. It's my first time along the knowledge scene.
Hello, Craig Weldon, Scottish Parliament business analyst. Parliament has an open data presence, which I've not had anything to do with. However, it's an interesting subject, so just come down for the first time to see what's what.
I'm Lauren Finley. I'm from the University of Edinburgh on the project called City School, which is looking at moving to South Streets and
Hello, I'm Helen Costello. I'm an information professional at the Scottish Parliament and group, and I'm here because we just started putting our phone on our open data and just want to see what it's all about.
Hi, I'm Kat McGill, and I'm from working for Edinburgh Marine Lab, which we run in Oxford, and I'm learning about open data and its role in opening up opportunities for citizen-driven innovation.
So we're Product Forge, we run hackathons, so our next one coming up in June is on housing homelessness, which we're running with Shelter, and then we're running an event on future libraries in October with the Special Libraries Information Council and Kennedy UK Trust. So if you're interested in those topics or hackathons, then come and give us a shout.
Great. Okay, so that's really interesting. Should have done this last time. So today the plan is that Pip will give a brief introduction. We'll then have a talk from Sally, then from Richard, and I think then we'll probably have a quick break, and then Leah is going to talk. And I wanted then to again do something a little bit different from usual and have a bit more of a discussion around the use of open data for civic engagement. I know that there's lots of information, knowledge, expertise in this room. It'd be really good to try and share it a little bit more of a dialogue and see what we can learn from this. So,
Can I give you this? Sorry.
I'm going to stop talking now.
You can put that on as well, though.
Ewan, at some point, can I have 5 minutes on open government partnership as well?
One of the things I was going to say is we should ask Doreen to talk about the Open Government Partnership. Yes, definitely. I was also asked by... Is it switched on? Yes. I was also asked by Bill Roberts to draw your attention to this event, which happens to be in Manchester. 26th of May, and Pippa is going to be talking at that. So it's on data-driven decisions for public sector, and we've also got Gregor Boyd from Scottish Government talking there. I don't know, I should suspect it's not very likely that many people from here would go to that event, but there is obviously a potential to run similar events up here in Scotland, and if there's an interest in doing that, maybe we should try and make it happen. So let me see if I can so I haven't got mirroring set up here. Sorry. I'm going to have to pull this out and do it, and then redo it. Pippa?
That's my one slide, so don't worry, it's not death by PowerPoint. I don't know if I need this, do I? Or do you need this? It doesn't actually make it louder. All right, hold on. I've only talked for... Anyway. I'll just hold that, will I? Yeah. Okay, well, hello. Ian's already done a welcome, and my name's Pippa Gardner, CEO and co-founder of Urban Tide. First point is really just to welcome you to Codebase. I don't know, have people been to Codebase before? Who's not been to Codebase before? All right, well, welcome. It really is a fantastic space, and it's developing all the time. They've just celebrated their second birthday, so they moved in here in March 2014. There's nearly 80 companies that are now based out of here. We're obviously one of them, and so I would have to say that the bar is high. You know, they don't take just anyone, but they have moved in 80 companies. They are the UK's largest tech incubator, so not just Scotland's. They are the UK's largest base. And they've also, I was speaking with them earlier today, they've raised, for the startups and the companies that they've got in here, they've raised just short of $500 million in investment that's going into the Scottish startup tech community. So that's really good. One of their key sort of figurehead companies is Fanjo and Kotakan, who were bought by Fanjo, were also based here. So they really are going places. And from a small startup, we also started just under 2 years ago, so we're coming up for our second birthday too, and for us to be part of this environment is incredibly supportive. They've got another couple of things that are going on, and there's an initiative called Code Clan, if people have heard of, that are now in their 4th cohort, and they're turning out people with coding skills on a 16-week programme that's run out of Codebase as well. And finally, this event space, this just opened about a month ago, so this is a sort of new front entrance in order to, so we bring important public people in this end. We all come in the back door, but this is quite a nice sort of space to bring in and welcome people from the external community. So delighted to have you here tonight. That's really good. A couple of things about Urban Tide. It isn't a sales pitch in any shape or form, but we are available to hire. No, it's not a sales pitch at all. Urban Tide, we work in primarily in the world of smart cities, but open data being such a key component of smart cities. We worked, prior to this, we all worked on the co-founders all worked on the Future Cities Demonstrator programme in Glasgow, so that experience behind us. And then since then, we've worked on a number of consultancy projects, so primarily in the world of open data. The most relevant one, which I spoke at the last meetup, is that we're working with Scottish Government to deliver open data training to all public sector organisations throughout Scotland. So that's been a fantastic project. We're just over 6 months in. Leah, where's that? Well, she's not there, but Leah's just written a blog with some, there you are. Just written a blog with some of the feedback and initial findings from the first 6 months. But it's just been a fantastic opportunity to go out and speak with, and train lots of public sector professionals that are involved in this space. And the take-up's been really, really high. It's interesting that we organise a 1-day training course and a 2-day training course, and actually, so the 2-day training course goes into more technical detail about how you would actually go around publishing open data, not just why you might want to do so and the strategy and policy behind that. And the take up for the 2-day training course has been higher than the take up for the 1 day. So there's a real appetite out there of people wanting to know more about open data, and not just more about it on a policy level, but actually how you would go about doing it and some of the barriers and the ways of overcoming that. So that's a fantastic project that we're involved in. We're also in the process, we got a grant from Smart Scotland, from the Scottish Enterprise, to start building a new data platform that will, not just about open data, but that makes the publication process for open data more simplified, but about data management within public sector. And our CTO, Toby, there can talk to you in far more detail if you're interested in any of the technology behind it, but there's some innovative technology around a data lake architecture and around sort of microservices in terms of how you would then consume that data. So we're working on both the product and the service side, which is quite an exciting time for us. So I've got a couple of calls to action here. So one is, this is a shout out and a plug. One is we're recruiting. And we need a developer, and it's really hard. I mean, I've mentioned Code Clan at the moment that are helping to sort of try and fill the skills gap for developers, but finding developers in Scotland is quite hard at the moment. So we're looking for a Node.js developer. So if anybody knows or is interested in anyone that would like to come and work for us, then that's great. Speak to Toby. We're also interested in guest blogs and various content around open data that we can feature on our website and in our building community. So Leah would be really happy to take contributions from people in this community. If there's interesting projects you're working on, then we would love to help you publish those. And then the third call to action is I mean the open data community within Scotland I think is really strong, but there's still pockets of it, and there's still many different networks that exist. I go to the Open Data Meetup in Glasgow as well, and there's lots of pockets of good work going on around open data. We actually bought the domain name opendata.scot about 2 years ago with the with the intention of doing something with that in terms of really trying to support that network, support the community, help get the information out there. And so we're open to ideas, and we're open to support from that, from anyone within the network and the community that has ideas about how to really pull the information together from Open Knowledge International and all the various other work that's going on there. So if you've got any ideas about how we can support that and work together as public, private, community sector and just individuals, then we'd be really, really keen to hear about that. And that's it, I think. That was more than 3 minutes, so I apologise for that, but I'm used to it.
Thank you.
Okay. There we go. Thank you very much.
While we're not doing plugs, I'll do a plug for Pre-Wired, which also takes place here, Wednesdays, 5:30 to 7:30. And if you're looking for developers, it's a great place to go. It's the under-18s, up-and-coming talent. And we really appreciate mentors, so people who are prepared to come along and help the kids do what they do. A lot of very smart young people, and it's sort of fun. So that's that. Now Sally.
She's supposed to do with it?
I could put it maybe.
Yeah, thanks.
on your list.
Yeah, I think not my first time. I'm just thinking where to push it. Actually, you know what? I'll do that. Oh, I don't care. Okay, cool. Let me know if that's working okay. Is that all right? Good look, Alan. Okay, so as I said, my name's Sally Kerr. I work for Edinburgh Council. I'm the Open Data Lead. I've been working in this area for about 3 years or so. We do have an open data portal, which you're welcome to go and look at. I'm showing you something slightly different here, which is a mapping portal that was built for Inspire. I'll stand over here. That was built for Inspire. If you're aware of the EU directive about publishing geodata, it's quite small, but it's something that the GIS team are working on. And I just thought you might not know about it. And the obvious thing you'll be wondering is why have we got 2 portals? Blame the EU. One of the things they had to do was build a portal, so they built a portal. We are going to federate them so that at least you'd still have the Edinburgh Open Data Portal to go to that will have everything together. There's a lot of things I could say about open data in relation to the council and how it's moving along, how it's progressing. The changes that have happened in the 3 years, the projects we've had, the products we've delivered, and I'm happy to talk to anybody in the break or whenever about all of that. I think what I'm interested in is what we're trying to do now, and that's actually what I want to talk about. So we've been trying to think about how to work more in communities and how to work with community planning and actually work with people that live in the city to help them understand our data and also to actually collaborate with us and to look at how we develop data together. The council, the most common thing I get asked is, have you got data for this? And then I go and talk to somebody because I'm not an encyclopedia, I don't know all the data we have. And they say, no, we don't collect that. And then I discovered nobody collects it. So it's quite interesting in that way that you have these gaps that nobody really notices until you're trying to do a piece of work or you're trying to layer data together and then you discover there isn't any data. And that's quite annoying if you're trying to do it for something like a development plan or you're trying to get input to just plan for the future anywhere in the city. And I think that would be an interesting discussion point for this evening, just to talk about that and to see how people feel about collaborating. Not so much about creating data, that's cool. Crowdsourcing would be fantastic, but actually looking at other data that might not be owned by the council, that even people that work with data and just create their own data sets, how they would feel about collaborating and working together and actually seeing what we could find out by working together. And that's really what I was going to say. The other thing I would say, which is just for interest, and it is a bit of it's not sexy, but it's interesting, is we're about to start an FOI pilot. Now that's because I was asked by our councillors to give them a briefing on the current status, the current impact of open data on FOI inquiries, whether it was reducing FOI inquiries. Now, what I discovered when I did the research, and I spent some time on that, in fact, I'm sure there's a paper in it somewhere, is that people have a lot of anecdotal evidence. They say, yeah, that's working. We're sharing data, and you go, okay, could you give me some evidence? No, we haven't tracked it. We don't actually know that. In fact, we're not really sure. And the more you ask them, it would kind of go like, well, actually, no, we're not really sure. And I thought, well, the only way to actually try and find this out is to do it ourselves. So we're running a very small pilot on common requests that we get asked, and we're releasing data sets that are either directly or sort of related to the requests. And what we want to track is, does it actually reduce FOI requests? Is it actually changing the focus of the FOI requests? Does it reduce the time people spend answering FOI requests? Now, the Scottish Commissioner is very interested in this as well. The publication scheme is about to be updated, and they're going to add open data into that, so that we have to have that in our publication scheme. But we're just interested to see what actually happens. But as you probably have guessed, my main interest is to see whether we can get some more data out of it. And that's actually why I'm doing it. And I have got interest now. I've got sort of data owners across the council sort of curious and interested to see what we're doing, and quite keen to see. So I share this for your interest, if you like, because I think it could be quite an interesting project. And I'd certainly be very happy to come back and share my findings when we finish, which is in about 6 months, and let you know what actually happened as part of that. So I think that's me. Thank you.
Does anybody have any quick questions for Sally?
Do you have a directory of what data is available from council?
I actually started with a directory on the website, but now I have a spreadsheet that you'd be welcome to have a look at. I can share it and make it open. But we don't actually have one on the portal. We don't have hundreds of data sets yet. We actually only have under 100, and some of them, I'll be honest, need updated. It's more, for me, it's been more about trying to look at the culture and the organisation and how we move forward with open data, but I'm happy to share it with you if you're interested. Yeah.
Sally, how will you measure whether a download or an access of data will be an FOI request? Are you asking questions at that stage, or how you?
No, gosh, that's scientific.
Or you that you see if the FOIs go down.
The FOI team are tracking what's happening at that end. They're tracking the requests to see what happens. And that's the agreement. I'm dealing with the data and they're dealing with the tracking at their end. We are tracking the data sets. We are actually going to see what happens. But you can't tell from that why somebody's looking at it and whether it's for an FOI request, which is a common problem in this world, because there's lots of data on our website, but we don't know why anybody's downloading it. You know, it could be for any reason. As I said, it's a small pilot. We're just seeing what happens. I'd love to expand it and actually do it as a bigger project, but get the first one over, and then we'll see.
Will you actually forward them straight to a portal as well? So if someone says, I'd like to have some information, please, you say, well, just look it up yourself.
Yes, but there is a very important aspect to this, which is advice and assistance that you need to give. So one of the things I have said to the data owners is if they want to put supporting information up, I would welcome that, because it would help people at their initial look at the data, and that might change the focus for a request that they want to make. What I'm hoping is that I'll start as, and I'm sharing this for the first time here, is that we'll start a cycle where they begin to see that actually if they do that, they share the data. So that eventually I'll expand the data sets, because they'll say, well, I did it for that data set, why wouldn't I do it for this data set? So that's what I'm hoping will happen. I'll certainly be trying to encourage that. Yes?
I was just going to ask what might be an example of a gap. So you were saying people ask you for things and then you go back and say, do we have this? And they say no, and then it turns out no one is. Do you have some examples to mind of
wow, that's the kind of question I wasn't really ready for. I'm trying to think of the last one I had, which I think was about sustainable travel. That's quite a difficult area. What you have to bear in mind is that councils gather what they need for their immediate job, but also what they have to report about. But they're not sorry, this is a sweeping statement, they're possibly not curious enough to think about, and also they're busy. So they're not going to be gathering data about everything that they think might be interesting. So this isn't a good example, it's not a real example, but say we have cycle counters, I know we have these in the city, but we might not have them everywhere. So actually what you get is partial information, and it may not be information that's directly gathered by the council, it may come from a third party. So you actually have quite a few loops to go through before you discover that, so you might actually get the data, and then you're going back and saying, well, this is only for this part or that part of the city, and we don't have the rest. So
we don't actually do traffic monitoring. You don't do road traffic on a regular basis.
No. But that's down, I mean, a lot of that's down to budget, and it's what's actually achievable. But it's common across the UK and probably wider, I would imagine. Yes?
So, I'm curious as to how often do you think the answer to a question is going to be a data set? I'm wondering if I have a particular question I'm interested in, and I get, say, an Excel spreadsheet back, is that an answer to my question?
Not necessarily. I said it was a pilot.
Sure, I'm just curious as to whether...
No, I don't think that. I think this is one of the areas that will be an interesting discussion, because if you talk to FOI practitioners, they make it clear how important it is to interpret the data, and I absolutely agree with that. But I think that you do get some queries, maybe from journalists, just random example, who actually do know what to do with the data, but they're still asking the FOI because that data is not in front of them and it's not openly available. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about at this stage anyway.
Which is why we need to head for proactive publication rather than any of us being asked.
Yes?
I just had a question on the publication. From a practical perspective, who's actually publishing your open data at the moment?
I'm glad you asked that question. Up until now it's been me, and I hasten to say, for those of you who are about to say, gosh, you're out of date, I do other things in my job. However, this year we're actually doing a programme of training with data stewards, and by the end of the year I hope to have a little cohort of people who will be publishing.
So is that the vision then for Edinburgh Council, that the administrators who are generating that data publish it as it's being generated?
I think that's an aspiration. I think the first step is getting people trained and getting them to understand changes they might need to make to their data before they publish it, so part of the assurance process and the prep process. So I think it's a journey. I think we're further along than we were when we started.
It's really interesting to hear how that goes.
Well, let's keep in touch.
Have you developed your own training course for that?
Well, training course is a very grand name for what I've done. I have some simple guidance for them to make it easy for them to do that, and we're going to roll it out probably in the autumn, I think.
And is that something that you would be willing to share?
I will once I've tested it.
Right.
Because it's great doing something like that in theory, but you actually want to roll it out and try it and then do a bit of reading. But sure, yeah.
Okay, let's thank Sally again.
Well, we've got your logo.
That's nice. There you go. Thanks.
I'm going to take a little while to tell you about MESH, Mapping Edinburgh's Social History. The three people at the top, myself and Eric and Sophie, are the sort of principals involved, with a bunch of historians and others who help us collect data, a lot of data, as you'll see. I'd like to begin with a wee story and a bit of self-promotion. In 1854, remember I'm a historian, so it's quite modern. 1854, John Snow, as many of you might know, discovered the source of cholera in Soho around a bunch of drinking wells. He couldn't have done that without a very good map, which I suspect would be the first series of the Ordnance Survey. You might be pleased to know that in Sanitary City, Edinburgh was actually ahead of the game. 1848, cholera outbreak, beginning to log those people admitted to the Royal Infirmary. Here we have the man's signature who included all this sort of data on the basis of where they came from, where they lived, where they congregated, and the cause, and usually whether they die or not. So the notion of space and health were very closely connected at that stage. And I show you this because historians deal with all sorts of messy data. Making a table out of this is relatively straightforward. Making a table out of this so that we can input it is very straightforward. We have some published data, but a lot of it, of course, is in manuscript form. And if you think about the way data is presented these days, there's not much difference to that which is applicable in a historical sense. We have all these different sorts of ways in which we are identified through an address, and many, many more. And if you think areas, we're also concerned with those as well. So much of our work is concerned with collecting data, both on an address basis and on an area basis. And one of the hardest things in beginning to analyze the historical data is to have the containers, the vectors in which we can use as we can use for the classification, in this case, registration districts, births, deaths, and marriages. And these change over time, and they overlay many, many times. Because although I showed you the list of areas, of course, it's self-evident to us, there's a multiplicity of these, and I doubt if any of us could actually name all the districts in which we inhabit, and the same would be applicable in historical time. So one of the things which I'm most pleased about as the project progresses since over 2 years now is to begin to develop a number of these resources which facilitate our historical analysis. And so now we have, I think, one of the most complex pieces of historical research to show the parishes from the 16th century, the 17th century, and of course we'll carry that forward because that's the only consistent basis on which data was really collected. So MESH does two principal things: creating digital data, creating OpenStreetMap with help from our friends. And that OpenStreetMap is created with three particular components: footslogging, field work, hundreds and hundreds of miles of field work, annotations to demonstrate what's in front of us as a survey, using historical maps to understand something about the structures that we're seeing on the ground, and satellite imagery to identify the plots. And so what MESH as a team has done most effectively is to identify nearly all the individual plots in the city, all the properties, so that each of these is transferred from that first sheet that you've seen, from this to this, with probably 10 or 12 different nodes for each of them, the very complex polygons that underlie this. And eventually, of course, to produce the map that we have now, with all the detail that is in there. So we've been on Portobello Beach a moment ago. Here we are now with the transfer, with the individual's properties identified by number, and a host of other characteristics which are also noted at the time, but which also, in fairness, are part of a contribution from the OpenStreet mapping community itself. So here we have, I think, a really much improved map. And this is largely due to the efforts that we've made in this team. So we've gone from this crude notion of our city to this much more sophisticated one. And I'm delighted that we have both council and government, Scottish government representatives here, because as I've said many a time elsewhere, if you ever want to think about a different taxation system, here at least you have a basis for an algorithm which would show something about the area, the footprint that people have. It'd be lovely that, because this would take us back to rates and to historical basis of taxation. And this is the effort that MESH has made. So of the buildings that MESH has enhanced in some way or made additions to, 90,000 of those will basically be what we've covered out of the 107,000 in the city. And the same kind of ratios for addresses, segments, and improvements, the refinements, amendments to points of interest. So a huge amount of this work has been done as part of the team. Now, I'm very grateful to Eric for his digging on this, but this is part of public good, part of a real endeavour to make our Edinburgh map a common good. Eric discovered that the Danish government made its national address file available in 2002, and that they estimated that the benefits on a cost to benefits ratio of 1 to 30 was about 14 million euros. So it cost 200,000, 14, 30 to 1. So this is the estimate of the indirect improvement. And if you scale that to the UK, with those assumptions, it's about 60 million. The census wasn't very good the last time round. The benefit of about 110,000. And you scale that to Edinburgh, 80,000 addresses, it'll rise to 90,000, 500,000 people, same ratio. This benefit would be about 350,000 every year in terms of efficiencies, contributions to business, opportunities to actually deliver things to the right address, and a whole host of other implications. And this investment is a public good. The Department of Business, of Innovation and Skills concluded in a study recently that there's substantial and valuable growth amongst different and new types of users, and that there's a recommendation that the product should be free to all. And that's something which is a sort of philosophical aspect as far as the project is concerned. So that's about creating the database that underpins the OpenStreetMap contributions that we've made. And it enables us then to pour in, to use our historical data to improve interpretive aspects, to, I think, make significant contributions to the sociology and politics, cultural aspects and so forth. I think it has really strong commercial and contemporary dimensions, all in the public domain. So here you have the butchers, just to show you how the data transfers in the historical terms. Here we have butchers in 1850, in 1860, in 1910, and in 2015. So there's a big gap there, and we have some data to fill it. But my interest in this, as it is with other trades and so forth, is to see how community and locality work together to construct neighbourhood and the kinds of structures, social capital, which governments are so keen to talk about. So here's another little example. I'm afraid I've lost the top of the slide, but this is a map of the GPs in 1911. You'll see they're heavily skewed to the West End and scattered around places. You can forget the GPs if you're in the Pleasant, St Leonard's, Greenside, the East End, and so forth. If you add the dentists, it doesn't make a lot of difference. But if you look at the pharmacists, they're everywhere. The poor needed pharmacy. They needed to avoid the costs of paying twice, once at the doctors and once at the pharmacists. So they went to the pharmacists, who are well represented in the East Side, around Greenside, Abbey Hill and Easter Road. Now, that's of interest to me because in 1910 we were beginning to think about the introduction of social welfare. And it demonstrates clearly why notions of a public good, a public welfare service, Lloyd George as Chancellor of the Exchequer trying very hard to develop a financial basis in which to introduce that programme. And then at a different level, it allows the computation, since the accuracy of the map is such, it allows us to make a number of calculations based on the data sets that we have. So here we have the pubs in the south side, those that exist in blue, those that used to exist, as it were, in red. And we've been using that strength to develop a project with Lost Edinburgh, Facebook's Lost Edinburgh, both to identify where the pictures are and to collate them in a database, a searchable database, so that we can find out, in fact, which areas have been well served, what it tells us about them, and a whole host of other aspects. With very well constructed, deeply researched metadata to support the images. So we're very lucky. We've invested heavily. We have the best map possible. We're very near to completing the entire area of contemporary Edinburgh. We're not like Glasgow. This is the best part of Glasgow. So you have a rather different setup. Here, Great Western Road. So this is really my message. There are 2 points. You wouldn't ask a surgeon to conduct an appendectomy on the off chance that they knew where the appendix was. And we shouldn't undertake social, economic, and other kinds of research without a robust spatial knowledge on which to construct it. And the second thing is that all the fancy goods that we have, spatial representations, visualizations, and so forth, are lovely. But they're only as good as the map. And so I really think that this Open Street community in Edinburgh and Edinburgh people have a huge resource, and I'm very proud of what the team has managed to develop thus far. And I think there's a lot of real goodies to come as we pile in the historical material and enrich what people believe is the central selling point of Edinburgh, its history. Thank you.
There's a few questions from Richard.
I'm curious about the gap between 1910 and 2015.
Between 1910 and...
The reason I'm curious is the field that I work in, US copyright has a major impact. So we have a huge amount of public domain information up to 1923, and it goes dark because of copyright. Do you have a similar issue historically there?
Well, just to answer the direct question, I only put up sample years. You can have any year you want, between 1770 and about 1970. I just picked a few. They were picked for particular reasons to illustrate historical points of inflection or understanding. Yes, we have a massive problem in terms of data and our access to data. The Registrar General has a 100-year rule on census material. We cannot get it. I have asked and asked and asked. And unless I've got some... And you know, I'm a social scientist. I need bulk data. I don't want to go down to the record office, pay my fees every time, and get individual addresses. I can't do that. It's just not worthwhile. It's not a useful interpretive and analytical basis on which to proceed. So without that access to Registrar General's data, I can do far better research on 19th century Scotland or anywhere else than I can on 20th century. And unless and until that, and what's worse about that, I should really just calm down and not have a rant. But what's worse about that is that we've sold the rights and have to buy them back. So ProQuest has a monopoly of our parliamentary papers. And I don't have the opportunity, I have the opportunity because I work in university, but nobody else does. And it's the same with our sources. I don't mind if the family historians pay through the nose for that data. I think it's wrong. But I certainly think that for researchers, but people in general, we should be able to get that. It's a scandal. It really is a scandal. And the thing about America is it's much more open, as we know. We find much more out from America about Britain than we do from contemporary British sources than from within the country. So I'm very glad you asked about 2015, and I could elaborate on a lot of this. It's not confined to Registrar General, let me just say that. It's true of the City Council, it's true of the other agencies of government, and it really is something which needs to be addressed in a really, really deliberate way. Amen.
Here. How much of your tool sets has been documented? Database, GIS systems?
Well, we're in the middle of a project, and it's at a very developmental stage. So in that sense, we've still got about half a year to go. There'll be much more material revealed on the website and so forth. But at this stage, we're just trying to keep abreast, to have so much work to do, frankly, that it's limited. But I mean, you can go to the website and see and do whatever you wish to the website there, because it's open data. Do you want to say any more about that?
No, the tools are open source. We use the tools that's the richness, I think, of using OpenStreetMap and developing on top of OpenStreetMap. If you use ordnance survey data, basically you have no tools with that. You have just basic GIS. With OpenStreetMap, you have geocoder, you have plenty of things around, so you can play with that. Solid source, do your stuff. You're a freelance developer, do your stuff. And he doesn't need to ask me any rights. Go for that, you're free. And that's the good thing. What Richard didn't talk about is that there is a big difference, I think, between Glasgow and a possible Open Edinburgh. Because Open Edinburgh can be based on top of OpenStreetMap. And if you look at the data sets in Glasgow, is there any data set of addresses? Will be, at some point, data set of addresses? No. Is it possible to do something here with addresses? Yeah, all the time. And people need just addresses. They have addresses and want to put things on the map all the time. And that's why the 350, that's just the minimum we can count at now. And I think it would be $500,000 per year when the season will be completed. That's just for the addresses. That's just for the addresses. The project, the grant for the project was 650, and with the overheads we just go for half of that. It means that for the Scottish Government, I asked a question at the representative of the Scottish Government at the State of the Map, Scotland, last October. Would it be possible to find 100,000 just to start doing the same thing in a small town? Could be Elgin or anything. At State of the Map, I've just compared two towns, Edinburgh, which is huge, and Elgin. Elgin could be done with in nearly no time. Because all we build that, the methodology is okay. We benefit from the NLS map, like the ordinance of the 1940s, 60s, they're out of copyright now. So that's 50 years for the out of copyright for the ordinance. If the town has been not bombed, and that's the case in many towns, or not too developed during this gap, then in 50 years it's good. So, then after I finish with that, because it's not 100,000, here we can see that this is not just 100,000 that you give. This is something that you will have in return. Because basically for tourist activities, the idea is to develop an atlas. We can develop an atlas from the data of OpenStreetMap. And if it's a competition in terms of data sets in the data portal, tomorrow Edinburgh has 1,000 data sets. And I will extract data sets individually in OpenStreetMap, and that's the first time. So if we play with this number, we can kill everyone. It's easy. In UK, we kill everyone. So it's not, we don't want to count in terms of numbers, because people counted numbers of downloads for open source software. We don't count about that. We count two things: number of data sets, the usability of the data sets. Do I need the data, the metadata since the 1920s in the data portal, where I can find that in the Met Office website? If I want to do a smart city, because it's a monthly base, and we will go for a second base in the future with this big data system, or what do we want to do? And that's the main thing. So it's a real investment. And then after, if the Scottish Government just release all that and just decide to pay the NLS to Gerald and all the maps, all the old maps, and then all the town goes there, I think we spent 150 doing this map here. We were alone, and we struggle a bit with the money now. But I go for a sabbatical next year, and we'll finish the project. That's the idea, and we do that. Because I think we don't go for, we go for ideas, we go for philosophy, and we want to prove that this thing can be applied for history, but can be applied for everything. We have other projects around that benefit from that. And if you go with the Urban Survey and web traffic agency in 10 years, okay, our data is great, but even the addresses are better in OpenStreetMap because we located the addresses at the door. So for the emergency services, they can directly go to the door. They don't need to be in the middle of the building. Then after, the next question is how to maintain the map. Sorry, I stopped at that. How to maintain the map, and here it's a political decisions. There is something to do with the planning, but the Urban Survey benefits a lot of basically all the planning things. Why OpenStreetMap could not benefit the same thing? Why is it not possible to reproduce the content of planning of the plans into OpenStreetMap? It's not too difficult, I think. It's just a political decision. Second one would be to benefit from the Edinburgh Chambers of Commerce. And then when there is a new point of interest, there is a new shop, a new restaurant or anything, we just go back. We just put that in the map, it's updated, it's daily updated. And then we have daily updated data set. Tourist over here, and I stop here. Sorry.
The reason I'm just intervening is because there are some pizzas which are kind of cooling off on this table. And maybe we should just grab some food and then carry on with the discussion.
It's political here. I think if you go with this choice, you will not regret that thing. Because the ecosystem around that, open data companies, IT companies or anything, will benefit all from that. Once again, it's open data, open source, to go together, and there will be something.
Yeah.
You'll find it very interesting because you have to convert old addresses into new addresses.
Yeah. But my other half worked with him. I looked at it. No, that's not bad for me.
Is that Brian Adams?
Yeah, there's not quite as good as the original.
No, that's what I always say.
And then Red and also
I'm really down.
When I'm reading with Pop,
I feel like you're being really ironic and it's really
I'm actually because about 5 years ago when I Spotify came out, I'm not buying another CD ever again. I'm not paying music, just kind of get on Spotify. The only 2 albums that I bought are Red.
Save tracks, all songs, Spotify, avoid problems. Talks like that. Tiny little bows.
I'm just wondering all the notes up for
You didn't hear that chat about...
It might be in a minute.
Actually, no, there's still volume coming through.
Oh no, you can hear it, listen.
The setup's too complicated. Oh god, I maximised the volume.
Is it on? Yes. Though I have to say I have an immensely loud voice, so whoever is listening to it.
As long as it's not directly in your mouth.
My laptop cover is made out of the same stuff, and my phone. It's just it's the only ones I've got. It's just I've been using it from offcuts from it. But I was walking around the office today with my laptop in its cover and my phone also with the same cover. I'm like, oh shit, that is so.
You guys just do it. That's coordinated. My life is
Come on, guys.
Okay, on to the second half, onwards and upwards. Leah's going to talk, but before she does, we're going to hear a little bit about the Open Government Partnership from Doreen.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'm Doreen Grove, as I said at the beginning. I work for Scottish Government. I wasn't avoiding your question. I'm not going to answer it, however. I'm going to quite honestly say I'm not going to answer it. I don't have sufficient background at the moment to be able to answer it. My real world, I'm an archaeologist and historian. So I know very well what the data sets are around. And one question I wanted to ask was whether you'd actually look for a collaboration with the Royal Commission. Well, there you are. Because it seems that combination is such an important one. What I asked Ewan to let me have 5 minutes for is for the last year or so, Scottish Government have been working with the rest of the United Kingdom to think about what a distinctive Scottish approach to writing an action plan for Open Government Partnership. And so I'll go back a step. How many of you know what the Open Government Partnership is? Oh, 4. Hey, brilliant, brilliant. Open Government Partnership was invented in 2011. It came about post the financial crash and around the same year that half the world's population, or countries that represent half the world's population, had civic unrest. So that's sort of the Arab Spring, and we had riots in Glasgow and in Brixton. Really very, very significant social impact and change. The impetus for, that was the impetus. There had been a kind of movement around the idea of open government for about 20 years. And the idea is about making governments more transparent, more accessible, and involving citizens in the decisions that affect their lives. The aim of the Open Government Partnership itself is a partnership between civil society and governments, and reformers in both, looking for ways that they can improve how people see and understand and hold to account governments, but are also involved in the actions that affect them. So that's fundamentally what it is. It started with 8 countries, and the UK was one of the founder members, as was the USA. It is now 69 countries, and it operates by having action plans which are pulled together by civil society and governments to deliver on these ideas, and they're independently reported on at the end of each cycle, and it's the idea is basically a race to the top. Like most human beings, governments like to compete with each other, so the idea that somebody's doing it better than you do is actually quite good impetus for getting change and seeing things work. So the United Kingdom, as I said, were founder members. One of the principal leads on the civil society side was Tim Berners-Lee, who I'm sure you all know far better than me, was fundamental in the development of the internet. And he remains a very strong voice in open government partnership. So one of the really strong themes is around data and how accessible it is, how usable it is by citizens and organisations and by governments. So making data as open and accessible, but as usable as possible. The UK has done 2 successive action plans. The first one they did in a smoke-filled room and didn't consult with anybody and got tremendous flack for that. They were absolutely just trying to get something out really quickly. There was nothing wrong with it, but it didn't meet the requirement for working hand in glove with civil society. By the second one, they got that right, but they forgot the rest of us. We devolved, administrations weren't involved. So we're moving and developing all the time. We are this year involved with the other governments of the UK, writing actions that will help us. And one of the themes is open data. So there are 6 themes: accountability, anti-corruption, access to data, citizen participation. Somebody's going to have to help me. I can't remember what the other one is. But they're all around the things that you all care about, basically. We have started a civil society action group, which is coordinated by SCVO, Lucy McTernan and Rakia Char. If anybody is interested in being involved, either in the aspects of holding us to account on open data, or more broadly, we're very keen on people being involved, and I can give you or Leah the information and you can get involved. The other thing I wanted to say is that just a couple of weeks ago, we were, and it was announced by Open Government Partnership, who are based in New York, that they've been looking for pioneers around the world of governments that are doing interesting things or prepared to look at being innovative. And they have identified 15 subnational governments, so bits of huge swathes of Canada, a huge swathe of Kenya and Ghana, and enormous cities like Buenos Aires and Paris, Madrid, Tbilisi, an area of Indonesia. We are all, along with Scotland, are now pioneers to look at how open government can reach beyond nation states and look at how we get innovation into it. So that changes the dimension of what we're doing in Scotland. It will give us a platform to to all those countries, but also to the other 66. So I'm looking for active support, active help. I'm even looking for passive support around passive help. I shall pass to Leah now.
Before you finish, just say...
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there anything specific that you think you would like to see as a contribution from, say, people here or other people?
There is. We have already, because we've been working on it over the last year or so, there are already 25 actions that we have come up with, and about a third of those involve open data. So I would like people to look at those and see whether they are stretching, whether they're sufficiently ambitious, whether there are other things that we could be looking at that could help us move that on. But as we go into the pioneer status, we're looking again at what we can do. And one of the areas where we're interested in is how we get collaborative working around using data to provide really usable things like financial data. So developing the sites between civil society and government. That may be around how people understand the budget, or it may be around other bits of financial data. But there will be places, I think, where people can be really involved if they would like to be. And we certainly would welcome that kind of expertise in the mix of the discussion. The honest answer is we don't yet know, because it is really very new announcement, and indeed so new that because we're in PEDA, I'm not making any sort of formal announcements until after we have a new government in place. But it's as an interested group, we would really very much appreciate the weight of that expertise coming in around us.
Is there likely to be any new funding to support the implementation of any of the OGP recommendations for Scotland as a sub-national government?
The expression "get a grip" that springs to mind. How long do you know, Gavin? The honest answer is there's nothing specific comes with it, but what it does do is raise the profile of all of those elements, and as they go up, the awareness ladder, as it were, then they're far more likely to be able to get funding. But there's no specific money comes with it at the moment. Any other questions? Anybody wants to be involved? Just let me know. Always. Good man. Yeah. Get involved, please. Yep.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Leah, and I'm going... Hey, Sally. Hey, Pippa. Hey, girls. Ewan said at the beginning this is sort of an unusual meetup in that we are going to have discussion with each other. For the second half. So instead of just hearing talks all night, we really want to get people talking about the citizen side of all this. So how do we get citizens engaged? How do we keep them engaged? How do we impart the importance of open knowledge to communities and citizens and get their kind of ongoing support and interaction through different open data projects? So I'm going to go through a couple of case studies that are local in that they're Scottish, and they involve people who are in this room. So if you want to know more about them, you have easy access to the people who were there. And to those people, Sally, Pippa, and Toby, if I'm misrepresenting anything, please interrupt me. And then I want to put forward an idea and some provocations about how we might do this. How do we interact with people better and keep them involved? So the first case study I want to talk about is the future maps, and this is part of the Open Data Future City Glasgow project. An incredible piece of work, a beautiful piece of work, that if you can see, people sort of embedded themselves in different communities in Glasgow and did sort of asset mapping with people in communities. These were digital and analog ways of mapping assets and historical information in certain neighborhoods. Created a lot of different types of maps, taught a lot of people how to use different open mapping resources. But it was kind of a short-term project, and it was really resource intensive. It was quite hands-on. And this you definitely cannot see, but it's a sort of guide if you were to carry on the type of work that happened in these community projects. This is an outline of how you might do that. So in addition to going into communities and helping teach people how to do these things and guiding them, they also left a kind of resource behind that now any of us can access to create our own community projects that we could create open maps with. Again, quite resource intensive. You'd need a lot of sort of motivation and proactive want to do this. Edinburgh Outdoors, yay. A project that Sally led. It was a Nesta-funded project and took open data about monuments, parks, different environmental pieces of information, created a website and an app And through those platforms, citizens can not only learn about the places that they're in, but they can take their own photographs and share them, tell their own story and share that. You can even take a quiz through the app about different places that you're in. So it was taking data that's open and creating something very useful for citizens and visitors to a city. And unusually, I think, unusually for this project, the developers were quite open about their involvement in the project. So they were publishing their experiences. They were publishing, that this is open source and it's available to anyone who'd like to access it. And even when Greener Leaf, for example, reviewed the app, one of the developers came on to have an open conversation about some complaints that a citizen had about the app in its early development. So even at that level, the engagement that Edinburgh Outdoors had is quite interesting. It was open, it was transparent, and it was engaging people all the way through, even after the app was created. But again, it's how do you keep that interest in the citizen side up? How do you keep that interest that people want to come and keep creating data in their own stories or pinning something on a map or sharing their photographs? And one way Edinburgh Outdoors is created a legacy and is ongoing is through social media. So there's an associated Twitter account that's very, very, very interesting, I think. So I can find out classes that are happening in local parks, things I wouldn't know about moths. I mean, of course you want to take part in that. But what I don't know, for example, is this engagement so long-term that if I go to this moth event, I will be encouraged to download the app and use that, and then keep the cycle going between the open data resource and the social media activity. So I put a shout out to my networks when I was preparing for this talk and this event, just to get an idea of whether or not other people had good practice examples. Where have they seen citizen engagement in an open data project that was going to be sustainable, long-term, and understandable and useful to people in communities and citizens individually. And this is a quote I got from a friend of mine who's an ethnographer. She works quite a lot with people in Glasgow, usually in more deprived areas. And she felt herself sometimes when she's trying to talk to citizens about open data projects, she also gets confused and finds it quite difficult to explain what's going on, the different layers, and how people can kind of keep an interest and embed this in their lives because it's so useful. I wanted to give an example of a way, probably a common way that some councils will show their open data sets. This is Herefordshire's Data Hub. It's a bit random, but I had it open in my tab because I was looking at it, so I thought I'd share it with you because it is well designed. It's very clear what this is, what is on it. But if you're telling citizens, and this came up earlier, that an answer to a problem is open data and an open data set, if you were to show this to Joe in Granton, would he know what to do with it? When he went into these data sets and CSV files, does he know why he's there and what he needs to do with it? So what are we doing in open data projects that helps people know how to interpret data, know why they're looking at this table, and also how to combine data sets to be very, very, very useful? So I had an idea just this morning, actually. I thought, wow, there's this 5-star rating system for open data. What if we had a complementary 5-star system for citizen engagement in open data projects? So you're always trying to achieve 5-star in everything you're doing in your open data project. And I shared this with you, and he said, oh, like this guy's done. So there's somebody who's had a similar idea, but with regard to data portals. So how can you also sort of rank the usefulness and the accessibility of what you're doing around open data? So with that in mind, I have some provocations. If we think about what the case studies that I've just showed you, they're pretty common, that people will sort of front load the engagement in their open data projects. They'll put a lot of resource and guidance and support in the beginning of a project to try to embed practice and knowledge and learning in a community, but then it doesn't seem to carry on. It doesn't seem to be long-term and really baked into the life of the open data project that's being carried out. So are we just creating really, really cool websites and beautiful artifacts and maybe ticking a box and having a nice window dressing? How do we level up from there? So if you think that 2-star data is level up from 1-star, how can we kind of draw a parallel between that model and citizen engagement? Do we know how to engage citizens in ways that are useful to them? Have we lost that as public sector organizations or as citizens who have a very high level of knowledge about data and very technical things? Do we know how to speak to people who don't? And that sustainable engagement isn't a priority, or it can't be a priority because you don't have the money, you don't have the time, you don't have the knowledge yourself. You hire it in, you can't sustain that. How can you build your own capability to make it a long-term actual collaboration between citizens and not maybe you had a stand on Princess Street for a week or something like that? That's engagement to an extent, but how can we make it more meaningful and try to understand how we can open data in ways that are actually useful? So those are my provocations. And if anyone has anything else to sort of as a provocation or a concern, and also Sally's point that you put forward about a good point for discussion, which I can't remember now. Training.
Publishing.
Was that? Oh, I don't remember. I know. So what we can do, because we've never done this before, is I don't know if this is a small enough group that we can just all have a wider discussion, or does this group feel too big for that? Can we shout out pontifications and solutions, or would you rather have smaller discussions in the traditional way? I think it's small enough. I actually want to hear what everybody has to say. Selfishly, I think it would be good to have a... Oh.
So, have you looked at citizen science? So I work in biodiversity, and citizen science is our current buzzword. Let's get the citizens to do it. And it seems to me there are two kinds of categories of project. There are some things where people are actually really engaged in, like the moths, for example. People care a lot about moths. So there are projects where people observe butterflies and birds, and there are apps for that. People are generating extraordinarily huge volumes of high-quality data. And then there's projects where it's like, I have the task, for example, I'd like to get somebody to do it for me, let me get the citizens to do it.
Yeah.
And those tend to fail. Is part of it trying to figure out what people want to do and exploit that, rather than saying, I need to do this, let me get the great unwashed to help me.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's a big conversation in citizen science, is the motivation. So what is the actual, well, probably in all these kind of engagement projects, what is the value exchange and what is the motivation of the citizen to spend their valuable time in helping you in something they might not be interested in? There's no incentive. It's case specific. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I guess I wonder how case specific is it? I mean, is there something fundamental? Like thinking like of health data.
Sure.
So if you ask people to sort of talk about health data, in one sense it's a big ask, but now I have all these apps that, I have an app that records my weight and I can get my blood pressure and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly I'm engaged because it's about me, plus I don't have to do anything. It just kind of happens. So those are big wins. So how many of these things can be framed like that? Right, I mean, is that the issue? It has to be something that's a personal kind of motivation.
Sure, probably to an extent. But also, I think the example of health data is a bit, we could probably be here for a long time talking about that specific example, because I think if you were using that app and it was created by the health service, would you feel the same way you do about it if it's just your iPhone or if it's your Fitbit? Would that change your feeling and your motivation to do that thing? Would you feel more confident or less confident?
What's extraordinary is that we will share personal data with bloody Zuckerberg, and we are resistant to sharing health data that could help save our lives. There's a real cultural issue around where and when we are prepared to share personal data, and I think that needs a lot more thinking about because
but sharing my data for some ways future good seems to me how I can sell. Or sharing my data because I get something immediately back from that. That's an easy thing. And I wonder how much of it is. Yeah, we are.
What do you get back from it, other than knowing your weight and your health?
So I get a weight chart and I say, oh, this week was bad.
Yeah, you could stand on the scale.
No, but I get to see in a time series. I get to realise, oh, going on holiday is a bad idea.
Not really, it isn't.
but I can sort of see these kind of things. So there's things. In some way, people share with Facebook because they interact with other people. Mm. And I think there's lots of cases of people trying to get people to engage for a common good.
Yeah.
And in my experience, that fails epically. Unless you've got a really immediate, tangible benefit for the person as well.
Or a certain type of person. So you get self-selecting groups like
yes, we do.
here. So that's another challenge, I think.
I'd be curious to hear from Jeremy how his experience of working with people in Greener Leaf, because that is quite a mature community organisation, which seems to have sustained. You're frowning. I mean, it sustained itself over how many years? I don't know. 5 years or something?
10 years.
10 years. So I know that Ali has, put a huge amount of effort into it, probably you have too, but there must be some support from people who see benefit from the organisation. How do you see that working?
This is not so much about data, I suppose. I think it's about people finding that there's something in it for them, I suppose.
But I mean, the issue about planning data I remember Ali talking about that 5 years ago, that people wanted to know earlier on what was happening in their neighbourhood. If they were going to object, they needed to know well in advance because they had to kind of think about it and organise. And I thought that was one of the reasons why you were putting planning data on the Open Edinburgh map.
Yes, I suppose that's something that people are very interested in, and this is also for the work of community councils, which are sort of a really underused venue for people to give input to the local planning process, and it's something else. Some of us have been trying to get all the planning data as well from the council. It's all about making it useful to the people. We have this small project now where we want to plant all these trees in Leith, and essentially part of this is going to try and crowdsource some of the locations that people would like to see trees, and I think it'll be quite interesting to see what people can come up with. So I've written a little app where you can, you just create a little count, and then you can just click on the map and it puts trees and add the trees and delete the trees. I can even show you actually, it's online, but it's about people have to feel like they're sort of contributing to something as well. But it's not just a one-way.
I would question though a little bit using Greener Leaf as an example and the work that Ali's done in the past. Using data to create stories and pieces of information that are easy to consume by the general public. I would wonder whether or not they know that that story came from data and analyzing data. And I might have the same question about Edinburgh Outdoors as well. Does everyone know, do people know that came about because of open data?
Does it matter?
Does it matter? That's the other question. Maybe it doesn't.
Not just some people.
The right people. It matters that the information is correct and that they're getting it from a credible source.
Yeah.
But I think the term data probably turns off most people. I mean, I think people would rather are interested because of the thing, not because of the fact that this is using some clever bit of gizmo to put two bits of information together.
I think in the back of that as well, that if you sit down with someone that, hi, I'd like to engage with you, it's a bit of a weird experience, and I think sometimes people in these projects, they say, well, of course we want to engage with people, and there's going to be these metrics about how people will engage, and actually, at the end of the day, I mean, I always feel a little bit uncomfortable with this, that somehow, I mean, we've got a democratic system, we have councillors, we have community councillors, and we are supposed to, vote for them and stuff, and sometimes, I mean, it's not a great, system sometimes in practice, but often I think sometimes, there needs to be leadership locally, and we say, oh, we're going to do this great, mapping thing, this, and actually, it would take someone who is responsible and accountable to the local community to go around and knock on some doors and ask some people. I think maybe sometimes that's engagement, because they can, hey, what are your issues here? What's this and that? And sometimes I think that this focus on, hey, we need to get this data because data is the best and data is the truth of it, that actually it misses out the rest of the system, which has evolved over centuries, which is actually just people asking other people what they think about things, and that's, I think, as valuable as getting these over.
But the two aren't mutually exclusive.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's but you can't.
Evidence in many ways, comes in many forms.
Yeah.
But actually, sitting and talking to people isn't very often the best. But a lot of people actually are uncomfortable in that kind of pulling into a room and being asked a question or engaged with, and feel more comfortable doing research for themselves online and finding things out. That doesn't mean people shouldn't be involved in the decisions that affect them. So while I applaud all the ideas of BACS and all of these kinds of things, for me it's about making some really crunchy bloody decisions about whether that development's allowed there, or whether you're able to feed in and influence a decision that's going to be made with sufficient information and understanding. Because knowledge is power. And unless knowledge is shared in a way that it's accessible and comprehensible, then whoever owns that knowledge still remains in power. So for me, it's about democratizing
So if you design the system, you
information.
probably also design the shape of knowledge.
Yeah. And you're never going to solve all of these things all at once. You start somewhere. And most people would rather not sit on a sunny evening talking about data. However, they may want to talk about climate change, or about well-being and health, or about particular issues. And the data that underpins that's hugely important, and having access to it to understand it and be able to influence those decisions actually hugely important. But I wouldn't see that as sitting to engage on a piece of data. Sorry, I'm probably speaking heresy here. I would be invited back.
I think Sally was saying to me, we were talking yesterday, and she said, we don't know what we don't know. And I think the question is like, how do I know what data is relevant to me and can help answer my question? And how do I, even if it's open, how do I know where to find it? So I was thinking, when you're talking about mesh, there's just like totally brilliant insights in there that you have. But if I'm not a spatial knowledge person and I'm just somebody in the city like trying to figure something out, I don't know what historical data is relevant to my question or what insights I could add. And unless I have like tons of time to read a whole bunch of things and just explore, like how am I ever going to find that? So,
well, in answer to the particular question, there'll be lots of data sets you'll be able to choose. So you'll be able to say, I'd like to perm this or that, and try it. So that's fine. But I kind of agree with the notion of subscriber democracy, which is what it was called in the 1830s and 40s, where people actually, on a neighbourhood or community basis, had an identity. And that identity was sufficient for them to engage with whatever it was that they were interested in. And I think artificially constructing data groups is just crazy.
I don't think, I think you're right. So I think part of them is how, that's why I asked about Greener Leaf, because there is some community organisation there. And an example which touches on both the citizen science in a way and also data as evidence is a project that was carried out in Cambridge in Tennyson Road, where the council was... So Tennyson Road runs across the city towards the station from Mill Road, and it's very heavily used by commuters to get from one side of the city to the station. And there was a request, I may be making some of this up, but basically I think the Residents Association there wanted traffic calming measures on that street. The council said, no, we're not going to do that, it's not a problem. Here's the data that shows it's not a problem. The residents didn't actually believe that data. So they carried out their own data collection exercise, timing cars and trying to figure out how fast they were going. And they used that to contest, the decision by the council. So it was, they actually had to learn how to work with data, and they were motivated to do it because it very deeply, it affected quite closely their everyday life. And I think that's a really great example of people being engaged in data, and whether that was open data or not wasn't so important. It was just they were understanding how data can be used to make an argument. And I think those are interesting kind of cases.
I think it's a really, I think that one is a really good one. But my understanding of that was it was funded by IBM, almost as a Microsoft, IBM, you're right. As a case study, which is good. And so I think there's then this role for the private sector, I think, to play in this, who are maybe trusted or maybe have some trusted, if you know what I mean by that. But there is a scepticism against the public sector. I know, but or maybe trusted because they've brought some cash to the party and they're seen as if they want removed from the council or from other civil society we've talked about. So I think that was an interesting one. It'd be interesting to see where that then went and if it could have been sustainable on its own. But yeah.
My understanding was that the community organisation was ongoing and proceeded and followed on. That there was a specific intervention by Microsoft to try and study what was going on there.
It's a good model, I think.
But it started with a problem, it started with a challenge.
It started with a problem.
It didn't say, should we play with some data and work out?
No, exactly.
Actually, we need something to do it. And it just turns out that we can use data to help. But, and it comes back to this thing where you said it's not really about data. It's what you said just now about the week. It's kind of not about data, although it's underlying stuff.
Well, it's worth mentioning this kind of stuff that we tried to do with the Cultivate, where we had a great idea, but it didn't, maybe you could describe it, didn't really feed into something people thought was a problem where we did it.
What did we do? We tried to construct something. That's the wrong way of doing it, but we were trying to how could we make data relevant to people so that we could try and, educate in some way or inform, I don't know. So we talked about mapping a little bit of Duddingston in order to help people to use some of the little bits of green space, or to think about how they might want to use some of the little bits of green space around Duddingston for better community use. And the idea was that if we mapped it and told people about it, then they might be able to wonder what kind of data they would need in order to use that space better.
Well, it was partly around food growing.
Yeah, that's right.
Pop-up allotments, that's what I did.
Yeah. But we tried to construct something. That was probably the only way of doing it.
If you remember that day, basically the first thing that was to build a map there.
Yeah.
Was to build the thing, and it's exactly the same thing with the open landscape community. I think they did a great work. So basically, if you don't have the foundation, and it's Jeremy copyrighted the kind of map is the foundation. If you don't have that, you will spend your time recreating the map, doing things. So if you want to engage communities, if you have the good data and the good open data, because in MASH, for example, it was possible to just create some historical data on top of the non-survey data. Everything was copyrighted. It was possible to publish. As academics, it's possible to write many papers, but nobody will never touch the data because it's copyrighted. Or you have to do some admin things, and there will be a huge cost, and then after, we deliver that, you need to pay the fee, and etc. So after imagine that, no, we go back to the new stuff. It's fully mapped. And the thing is that you just go with, you create an app in 2 seconds, like Jeremy did with the trees. We create something else than the trees, and then you go and rather than trees, just a point, you create a polygon. And you have your map, and you create the data sets, you can push the data sets into the data hub, and that's one. And then after you create, to start this application on top of OpenStreetMap, people want to redevelop that, they do that. They want to do that in another neighborhood, you merge the data sets. And after you move to something else. But so you need the data, you need open data, but good quality open data. And then after, if people will use, I think it's like open source software. People are free to use or not use, but at least it exists. And if people want to use that, after it's like when you start a book. It's like when you start a book, you don't know the story, so you need to read. And it's the same thing with data. It's the same thing with the software. You need to write to learn a bit, and then after you go on, and then after you fear is okay, and you move on, and move on, and move on. And then after there is this kind of circle. The connection is how do you all connect these applications with people? And I think it has to go through a kind of huge entity, because the City Council, I just checked, for example, the YouTube videos and the number of views. I think the top one is 26,000 for 500,000 population. So why people don't check the YouTube videos of the City Council? So is there a media to find to say, okay, that's the way to go, and maybe just a channel, and everyone is follows this channel and say, if you're interested about that, just go for it. And it's
Is there a risk, right? So I was just thinking of a story that one of my family members was telling me about something that happened in the village that they live in, which will remain nameless. It's far enough away from the council for them to often not want the council to know what they're up to in the village. So they're a village that they have a lot of community activities, and often they're like, can we do this? Can we convert this empty bit to this thing? Or recently they were drilling holes in the public car park so they could secure marquees for a festival thing that they're having. And they're like, if we had to ask permission for this, it would take, the council would have to come out and do a health and safety review, and then they tell us either not to do it or whatever. And a lot of the impression that I get is a lot of what goes on in the village is kind of justified after the people there have done it. And I just wonder, is there a risk with sort of open data and collection that actually stuff, that kind of organic nature of people just getting on and doing things, is there a risk that that's kind of tamped down a bit?
That's the same thing with the forum, and that's the same thing, for example, with the comments in a newspaper. You need a kind of moderation.
Mm-hmm.
I would say when people create lots and lots of data, I think it's to start with something, and then after that's clear what's the next step and the other provocations. But I think that the idea is to start with something. But I think that the idea of having a common good, because the rail name just disappeared, okay, so the addresses disappear with that. It's very difficult to retrieve the addresses. So what the Cabinet Office created, I think it was 2-3 years ago, there was a project called Open Addresses UK. And with the new budget, they will invest 5 million to recreate the addresses, because they lost the addresses by selling the right name to the private sector. So here, if we manage to collect the addresses, it's like, for example, the Natural Neighbourhood, UN work on that. If we've lost the number, it works for us. It means that we have 130,000 people looking at this. And if we ask them to do, could you just tell us where you live with natural neighbourhoods? We have maybe 50,000 people. It's 16, 17 times more than the survey of the City Council. And it's with no investment. So if you turn that on a good basis, and you just go at the kind of City Council level, or district level, I don't know, it works. I can't see why it would not work. But after it has to be a bit of fun, because lots of everybody is interested. So that's why we pick up this one. Because but then after we can imagine to put any kind of data behind this one. not just that. We could even put the YouTube videos of the city council so that they can see that and interact with them.
Great. Thank you. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to carry this kind of thinking on, these conversations on, because I got stuck down some pretty deep rabbit holes when I was just even talking to my own circle of friends and professional peers about this. I think there's a real active need and conversation about, well, how do we do better? How do we level up? How do we sustain meaningful engagement? Or how do we build it in the first place? So I'm going to carry this on myself somehow. I'll be publishing a friend of mine, so the ethnographer who was WTF, what's going on, she's quite interested in kind of bringing some ethnography into this kind of work. So if anybody's interested in that, I'll be publishing probably just small projects, but useful, I would think. And I think that's it. Thanks for sticking around so long and sharing your thoughts. And when's our next meeting again? I don't know if we know.
Probably early July. Yeah, early July.
Is there anything people would be interested in hearing about or talking about at the next meeting? Is there sort of a burning question or issue or problem you're having that'd be good to...
By which time we may have commitments that we would like people to comment on.
Okay.
If you have nothing else on your agenda.
We may not be in the EU.
We may not. I was thinking that.
That would be a good discussion point.
Is there an online version of the draft OGP?
There is at the moment. It will change, but there is. You managed to find it, Andy.
Just through the... Google.
Okay.
Just Google.
Is it on OGP site?
It's the OGP Scotland one. There is a UK one. There will actually, part of it at least, will be published on May the 12th, along with the anti-corruption summit. But not Scottish.
Right, okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, do you want me to say that the next one will be live stream?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, it's up to you. Will the next one be live stream?
It takes a month for me to get some basic version of the
Does it work for other
Because yeah, it was